Cairo, Egypt, April 2019. Layla Hassan was 24 years old when she first saw the photograph of the man who would become her husband. It arrived via WhatsApp from her Aunt Fatima, who lived in Berlin and had been trying to arrange a suitable match for her niece for the past 2 years. His name is Omar Khalil, the message read. He's 32, works as an engineer for Mercedes-Benz, has German citizenship, owns his own apartment in Berlin. Good family from Alexandria. He's looking for a good Egyptian wife who understands our culture. I think you two would be perfect together. The photograph showed a handsome man with dark hair and a neat beard, standing in front of the Brandenburg Gate wearing an expensive-looking coat. He looked successful, confident, the kind of man who'd made it in Germany, the dream that so many Egyptian families harbored for their children. Layla sat in her family's modest apartment in the Nasser City district of Cairo, holding her phone and studying the photograph. She was a pharmacist working at a busy chemist shop 6 days a week, earning enough to contribute to her family's expenses but not enough to imagine a future beyond the same cramped apartment, the same daily struggles, the same limited horizons. Her mother, Nadia, peered over her shoulder at the photograph. He looks respectable. And Fatima says he has German citizenship. That means you could live in Germany, Layla. Think about that. A real future. Opportunities. Maybe eventually you could bring us there too. Layla's father, Ahmed, was more cautious. He'd worked as a taxi driver for 30 years, navigating Cairo's chaotic streets, and he developed a skepticism about anything that seemed too good to be true. We don't know this man. We don't know his family. Just because he has money and citizenship doesn't mean he's a good person. Fatima knows the family, Nadia countered. They're from Alexandria, good people. The boy went to Germany for university and stayed. He's done well for himself. And he wants an Egyptian wife, someone with proper values, not one of these German girls. That shows he respects our culture. Over the following weeks, Layla and Omar began chatting via WhatsApp and occasional video calls. He was charming, attentive, and respectful. He asked about her work, her interests, her dreams. He spoke about his life in Berlin, the engineering projects he worked on, the apartment he'd bought, the life he'd built in Germany. I've been successful here, Omar told her during one of their video calls, his face illuminated by the glow of his phone screen. But success means nothing if you don't have someone to share it with. I want a wife who understands where I come from, who can build a real Egyptian home here in Germany. My mother wants grandchildren who will be raised properly, not like these German kids with no respect. Layla found herself drawn to his vision. She was 24, the age when Egyptian society expected women to be married. Her younger sister was already engaged. Her cousins were having children. The pressure from her family, from society, from her own awareness of time passing, it all pushed her towards saying yes to this opportunity. In August 2019, Omar traveled to Cairo to meet Layla and her family in person. He stayed for a week, meeting with Layla always under the watchful eyes of her parents or siblings as was proper. He brought expensive gifts, perfume for Layla's mother, a watch for her father, toys for her younger siblings. He spoke respectfully to her father, complimented her mother's cooking, and treated Layla herself with careful courtesy. On the fourth day of his visit, in the formal sitting room of the Hassan family apartment, Omar asked for Layla's hand in marriage. Her father asked the traditional questions about his means, his intentions, his ability to provide. Omar answered each one satisfactorily. He had a good job, owned property, had savings. He wanted to marry quickly, within a few months, because he had limited vacation time from work and wanted to settle into married life as soon as possible. The engagement was formalized with a small ceremony. A mahr was agreed upon, 30,000 Egyptian pounds, a substantial sum that demonstrated Omar's seriousness. The wedding was scheduled for January 2020, giving Layla time to prepare, to process the visa paperwork to join her husband in Germany, to say goodbye to the only life she'd ever known. Those months between engagement and wedding passed in a blur of preparation. Layla continued working at the pharmacy, saving money for her trousseau. Her mother and aunt spent evenings with her, preparing the traditional items a bride needed: embroidered linens, gold jewelry, clothing for her new life. Her friends threw parties for her, celebrating and envying her good fortune in landing a husband with German citizenship. But there were moments when Layla felt a creeping unease. During their video calls, Omar's mood could shift quickly. One moment he'd be charming and affectionate, the next moment cold and critical if she said something he disagreed with. He had strong opinions about how a wife should behave, how she should dress, how she should conduct herself. "When you come to Germany, you need to understand something," he told her during a call in November. "Yes, you'll have German residence through me. But you're still my wife and you'll follow my rules. I've seen too many Egyptian women come to Germany and start acting like these German women, working, going out, forgetting their duties. That won't happen in my house." "Of course not," Layla assured him, pushing down the discomfort. "I respect our traditions." "Good. Because I have a temper, Layla. My mother will tell you, I don't tolerate disrespect. My first wife learned that the hard way." Layla's heart skipped. "First wife? You were married before?" "It didn't work out. She couldn't adjust to life in Germany, couldn't be the wife I needed. We divorced 2 years ago. It's not important." But Layla thought it was important. She asked her Aunt Fatima about it during their next call. Fatima's answer was vague, uncomfortable. Yes, he was married before. The girl went back to Egypt after the divorce. These things happen. Don't worry about it, Habibi. Focus on your own marriage. Layla tried to ask more questions, but her family dismissed her concerns. She was getting cold feet, they said. Every bride felt nervous. Omar was a good match, educated, successful, established. She was lucky to have found him. Don't ruin this opportunity with unnecessary worry. On January 15, 2020, Layla Hassan married Omar Khalil in a traditional ceremony in Cairo. The celebration was held at a modest hotel banquet hall, with 200 guests, mostly Layla's family and friends, since Omar's family couldn't travel from Alexandria for a midweek wedding. Omar wore an expensive suit. Layla wore a white wedding dress that her mother had saved for months to afford. In the photographs from that day, Layla looks beautiful but subdued. Her smile doesn't quite reach her eyes. In one photo, taken while Omar isn't looking, her expression shows something that looks almost like fear. After the wedding ceremony and celebration, Layla had 3 days to say goodbye to her family before flying to Germany with her new husband. Those 3 days were filled with tears, her mother crying at losing her daughter to a country so far away, her father trying to be strong but unable to hide his worry, her siblings clinging to her. "If anything is wrong, if you're not happy, you call us immediately," her father told her privately on the last night. "Don't suffer in silence. If he mistreats you, we'll find a way to bring you back." "I'll be fine, Baba," Layla assured him, though she didn't feel as certain as she tried to sound. "Omar is a good man. Everything will be fine." On January 18, 2020, Layla boarded a plane to Berlin, leaving Egypt for the first time in her life. Omar sat beside her, working on his laptop for most of the flight, barely speaking to her. When she tried to look out the window at the clouds, he told her to close the shade. The light was bothering him. They landed at Berlin-Brandenburg Airport in the afternoon. The January cold hit Layla like a physical blow when they exited the terminal. She brought a coat, but it wasn't nearly warm enough for a Berlin winter. Omar didn't offer her his jacket. He just told her to walk faster to the car. The drive to his apartment took 40 minutes through streets that looked nothing like Cairo. Everything was so clean, so orderly, so cold. Layla watched the city pass by through the car window, feeling increasingly isolated and far from home. Omar's apartment was in the Nukoln district, a neighborhood with a large Turkish and Arab population. The building was modern, the apartment itself was spacious, 2 bedrooms, a modern kitchen, large windows. But it felt sterile, unwelcoming. There were no decorative touches, no warmth, just functional furniture and bare walls. "This is your home now," Omar said, setting down her suitcases in the living room. "The bedroom is through there. You should rest, you look tired. I need to go to the store to get some groceries for dinner." He left her alone in the strange apartment. Layla sat on the couch, surrounded by her suitcases, in a country where she knew no one except her husband and her Aunt Fatima, who lived on the other side of the city. She called her mother, but the conversation was difficult. Her mother was crying, asking if she'd arrived safely, if the apartment was nice, if Omar was treating her well. "Everything is fine, Mama," Layla said, though she felt hollow inside. "I'm just tired from the flight." When Omar returned 2 hours later, he'd brought basic groceries but also alcohol, bottles of beer that he put in the refrigerator. Layla watched with surprise. He'd never mentioned drinking during their courtship, and alcohol wasn't part of their family culture. "You drink?" she asked carefully. "I'm in Germany now. I do what I want in my own home," he replied coldly. "You'll learn that quickly. Here, I'm not bound by Cairo's rules or your father's expectations. Here, I'm the master of my house and you'll do what I say." That first night, Layla tried to make dinner with the unfamiliar groceries in an unfamiliar kitchen, with utensils and appliances she didn't know how to use. The Egyptian rice she attempted didn't cook properly in the German rice cooker. The chicken was undercooked. Omar ate in silence, his displeasure evident in every movement. After dinner, he told her they should go to bed. It was, after all, their wedding night, delayed by 3 days of travel and arrangements, but still technically the beginning of their married life. In the bedroom, Layla tried to fulfill her wifely duties, but Omar was rough, impatient, uncaring about her discomfort or pain. When it was over, he rolled over and went to sleep without a word, leaving Layla lying awake in the darkness, tears sliding silently down her face, wondering what she'd done in agreeing to this marriage. Over the following days, a routine established itself, and it wasn't the life Layla had imagined. Omar left for work early each morning, leaving her alone in the apartment with strict instructions not to go out without him. She wasn't to contact her Aunt Fatima without his permission. She wasn't to waste time on the phone with her family in Egypt. She was to clean, cook, and wait for him to come home. "You don't know Germany yet," he explained. "You don't speak German. You don't understand how things work here. It's better if you stay home until you learn. Maybe in a few months, if you've been good, I'll let you start taking German lessons." Layla spent long days alone in the apartment, looking out the windows at a city she couldn't explore, speaking to no one, isolated in a way she'd never experienced in crowded Cairo. She called her mother when Omar was at work, but she didn't tell her the truth, that she was lonely, that Omar was controlling, that something felt deeply wrong. She didn't want to worry her family, and besides, what could they do from Egypt? 3 weeks into the marriage, Omar's mask slipped completely. Layla had made dinner, chicken with rice and vegetables, and had accidentally oversalted the rice. Omar took one bite, then threw his plate across the kitchen. It shattered against the wall, rice and chicken scattering across the floor. "Are you stupid?" he shouted. 3 weeks and you still can't cook properly? What kind of wife are you?" "Sorry," Layla stammered, already moving to clean the mess. "I'll make something else." You'll clean this up and then you'll stand in the corner until I tell you to move. You need to learn that mistakes have consequences. For the next hour, Layla stood facing the corner of the living room while Omar sat on the couch watching television and drinking beer. When he finally told her she could move, she cleaned up the mess and went to bed without dinner. The next morning, Omar acted as if nothing had happened. He kissed her goodbye, told her to have a good day, and left for work. Layla sat in the apartment, wondering if she'd imagined his anger the night before. But it happened again. And again. Small infractions. A bathroom not clean to his standards, dinner served 5 minutes late, a tone of voice he interpreted as disrespectful, resulted in disproportionate rage. Sometimes he shouted. Sometimes he threw things. Once, he slapped her across the face hard enough to leave a mark. "This is your fault," he told her after hitting her, his voice calm now reasonable. "You provoke me. You make me angry. If you just learned to be a proper wife, I wouldn't have to discipline you." Layla started calling her mother less frequently, afraid that her voice would betray what was happening. When she did call, she kept conversations short, claiming she was busy adjusting to her new life. In early February, Layla finally worked up the courage to call her Aunt Fatima, hoping for help or at least understanding from someone who knew both Egypt and Germany. "Auntie, I need to talk to you about Omar," she said quietly, keeping her voice low in case he came home early. "What about him? Is everything okay?" He's not what I expected. He's controlling. He won't let me leave the apartment. He gets angry over small things. And he hit me." There was a long pause. Then Fatima's voice, uncomfortable, reluctant. "Layla Habibti, marriage is difficult at first. You're adjusting to a new country, a new life. Omar works hard, he's probably stressed. You need to be patient, be a good wife, and things will get better." "But Auntie, listen to me. You've only been married a month. Give it time. Learn what he likes, how he wants things done. Make his life comfortable and he'll soften. This is how marriage works. He told me he was married before. What happened to his first wife?" Another pause, longer this time. "She went back to Egypt. They weren't compatible. Layla, don't cause problems. You're in Germany now. You have opportunities your mother and I never had. Don't throw that away because the first month is difficult. Every marriage has an adjustment period." Layla hung up feeling more alone than ever. Even her aunt, who lived in Berlin, who could have helped her, was telling her to endure. On February 10, 2020, 3 weeks and 3 days after arriving in Germany, something inside Layla changed. She was cleaning the apartment, a task that now consumed hours of her day because Omar's standards were impossibly high, when she found his German passport in a drawer. Next to it was his Egyptian passport. And beneath those, hidden under some papers, was another document. Divorce papers from his first marriage. Layla pulled out the documents carefully, her hands trembling. The divorce decree was in German, which she couldn't read, but she could make out dates and names. The divorce had been finalized in February 2018, just 2 years ago. The wife's name was Amira Mostafa. But there was something else. A German police report, also in German with Amira's name on it. And beneath that, a restraining order. Layla couldn't read the German text, but she understood enough from the official stamps and the word police repeated throughout. Omar's first wife had filed police reports against him. There had been a restraining order. Whatever had happened in that first marriage had been serious enough for German authorities to get involved. Layla photographed the documents with her phone, her heart pounding. Then she carefully put everything back exactly as she'd found it. She spent the rest of the day in a state of anxiety, jumping at every sound, terrified Omar would somehow know she'd found his secrets. That evening, Omar came home in an unusually good mood. He'd brought flowers, cheap ones from the grocery store, but still a gesture he hadn't made before. "I've been thinking," he said over dinner. "You've been here almost a month now. I think it's time we made this marriage official in Germany, not just in Egypt." Layla looked up from her plate. "What do you mean? We're already married. We're married under Egyptian law. But for you to get proper German residence, we need to register the marriage here. I made an appointment with the Standesamt, the civil registry office, for next week. We'll make it official." "That's good," Layla said carefully. "Will that help me get residence papers?" "Eventually. But there's paperwork processes. It takes time. For now, you'll just have a tourist visa, but the marriage registration starts the process for your residence permit. Once you have proper residence, you can work, have more freedom. But you have to earn it first by being a good wife." That night, lying in bed after Omar had fallen asleep, Layla pulled out her phone and opened the photographs she'd taken of the documents. She wished she could read German. She wished she knew what those police reports said, what had happened to Amira, Omar's first wife. She considered calling her family, telling them everything, begging them to help her return to Egypt. But what would she say? That her husband of less than a month was controlling and had hit her once? Her family would tell her the same thing her aunt had said: "Be patient, be a better wife, don't give up so quickly." And there was another complication. Layla had learned 2 days earlier that she was pregnant. She'd taken a test in secret, and the positive result had filled her with conflicting emotions. A baby tied her to Omar permanently. But a baby was also leverage, a reason for her family to support her if she needed to leave. She hadn't told Omar yet. She was afraid of how he might react, afraid that a pregnancy might make him more controlling, more possessive, more dangerous. On February 14, 2020, Valentine's Day, though Omar made no acknowledgement of it, they went to the Standesamt to register their marriage. The building was official and cold, with German efficiency that felt impersonal to Layla. They sat in a waiting room with other couples, some clearly in love, others looking as uncomfortable as Layla felt. The official made a note and continued with her questions. Layla wanted to speak up, to tell the truth, but she was afraid. What would happen if she contradicted Omar here? Would they deny the marriage registration? Would Omar hurt her later for embarrassing him? The official turned to Layla and asked in broken English, "You are here of your own free will? You want to marry this man?" Layla hesitated for just a moment too long. The official's eyes sharpened, focusing on her with sudden intensity. She asked the question again, slower. "Are you here because you want to be here?" Omar's hand found Layla's under the table, squeezing hard enough to hurt. A warning. "Yes," Layla said quietly. "I want to be here." The official studied her for another moment, then continued with the paperwork. After 45 minutes, their marriage was registered in Germany. They were given official documents, and the official explained in German, with Omar translating, what the next steps were for Layla's residence permit application. As they left the building, Omar was in a good mood. "Now it's official. You're my wife under German law. That means German protections but also German obligations. Here, a wife can't just run away with her family's support. Here there are consequences." That evening, Layla finally told him about the pregnancy. She'd hoped the news would soften him, make him happy, transform him into the man he'd pretended to be during their courtship. Instead, Omar's face darkened. "Already? We've only been married a month. I thought you'd be happy. You said you wanted children." "I do want children. Eventually. When you've proven you can be a proper wife. When I'm ready. Not now, not when you can't even cook a proper meal or keep a clean house without complaining." "I'm not complaining." "You're questioning me. Right now. That's complaining." He paced the living room, his agitation growing. "A baby will change everything. You'll have an excuse to be lazy, to not fulfill your duties. And if it's a girl, you'll probably try to raise her to be disrespectful like you." "I'm not disrespectful," Layla said, her voice trembling. "I do everything you ask. I stay in this apartment all day, I cook, I clean. You do the minimum. And now you're pregnant and you'll do even less. Do you know what this means? I'll have to support you and a baby while you sit around getting fat and useless." The argument escalated. Omar shouted about the inconvenience, the timing, the burden. Layla cried and tried to defend herself. At one point, Omar punched the wall so hard he left a hole in the plaster. At another, he threw a glass that shattered inches from Layla's head. Finally, exhausted from shouting, Omar stormed into the bedroom and slammed the door. Layla cleaned up the broken glass with shaking hands, then spent the night on the couch, afraid to join him in the bedroom. The next morning, Omar acted as if nothing had happened. He made coffee, kissed Layla on the forehead, and told her to have a good day. The dual nature of his personality, charming and normal one moment, violent and terrifying the next, was driving Layla to the edge of sanity. Over the following week, Omar became increasingly fixated on the pregnancy. He researched abortion clinics online, though he knew Layla would never agree to an abortion for religious and personal reasons. He talked about how expensive children were, how they ruined careers and freedom, how Layla was trapping him. On February 22, 2020, exactly 5 weeks after Layla had arrived in Germany, Omar came home from work earlier than usual. Layla was in the kitchen, preparing dinner as she did every evening. She heard the door open and called out a greeting, but Omar didn't respond. When she turned around, he was standing in the kitchen doorway, watching her with an expression she'd never seen before. It wasn't anger or frustration or the cold control she'd become accustomed to. It was something else. Something calculating and final. "I've been thinking," he said quietly, "about the baby. About our marriage. About what's best." "Okay," Layla said carefully, putting down the knife she'd been using to cut vegetables. "I've decided I want a divorce. This isn't working. You're not the wife I thought you'd be, and I don't want a baby right now. We'll divorce, you'll go back to Egypt, and we'll both move on with our lives." Layla felt a rush of relief mixed with fear. Divorce meant freedom, meant going home, meant safety. But divorce also meant shame, meant failure, meant facing her family after just 1 month of marriage. "If that's what you want," she said quietly, "I'll go back to Egypt. I can leave this week if you help me book a flight. It's not that simple. There's paperwork, processes. The marriage registration complicates things. But we can work it out." He stepped closer. "But first we need to talk about some things. About what you'll tell people about why the marriage failed. About what story you'll give your family. I'll tell them we weren't compatible. That's true enough. And the police reports you found? The papers about my first wife? Will you tell people about those?" Layla's blood went cold. How did he know she'd found them? She'd been so careful to put everything back exactly as it was. "I don't know what you're talking about," she lied. "Don't lie to me." Omar's voice exploded with sudden rage. "I know you photographed them. I checked my phone records. You were using data that day when you never used data. You found my papers and you photographed them. What were you planning to do with them? Show your family? Show the German authorities?" "I wasn't planning anything," Layla stammered, backing away. I was curious about your first marriage. That's all." "You were curious? You were spying. You were collecting evidence. Just like Amira did. Just like she tried to do before I stopped her. Before I stopped her." The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. "What happened to Amira?" Layla asked, though she was suddenly terrified of the answer. "She went back to Egypt." "Like you're going to go back to Egypt?" But first, you need to delete those photographs. Give me your phone. Now. Layla's phone was in her pocket. She'd been keeping it on her constantly, her only connection to her family, her only potential lifeline. She pulled it out slowly, but instead of handing it to Omar, she ran. She ran for the apartment door, her only thought escape. But Omar was faster. He caught her before she'd taken 3 steps, his hand closing around her arm hard enough to leave bruises. He wrenched the phone from her grip and threw her against the wall. "Did you think you could run?" he snarled. "Where would you go? You don't speak German. You don't know anyone. You don't have money. You're nothing here without me. Nothing." He checked her phone, scrolling through rapidly, finding the photographs she'd taken of his documents. His face contorted with rage as he confirmed what he'd suspected. "You stupid woman. You stupid, interfering woman. Just like Amira. She tried to report me too. She tried to tell the German police lies about me. And you know what? It didn't matter. I'm a German citizen, I'm an engineer, I'm respectable. They believe me over her. And you're even less credible than she was. You don't even have German residence yet. You're just a tourist who overstayed." "I'll leave," Layla said, her voice shaking. "I'll delete the photos, I'll go back to Egypt, I'll never tell anyone anything. Just let me go. You think I can trust you? After this? After you've already betrayed me?" Omar grabbed her by the throat, slamming her against the wall again. "Do you know what my mother told me? She said Egyptian women from traditional families are the best wives because they're obedient, respectful, grateful for opportunities. But you're none of those things. You're ungrateful, suspicious, disloyal." He was squeezing her throat now, not enough to completely cut off her air, but enough to make breathing difficult, to make her panic. "Please," she gasped. "The baby? There is no baby. You'll miscarry it tonight, one way or another. And then you'll go back to Egypt, and you'll tell your family the marriage didn't work out because you couldn't adjust to Germany. That's the story. Do you understand?" Layla couldn't breathe enough to answer. Black spots danced in her vision. She clawed at Omar's hands, trying to loosen his grip, but he was too strong. "Do you understand?" he repeated, squeezing harder. Layla managed to nod weakly. Omar released her suddenly, and she collapsed to the floor, gasping and coughing. He stood over her, his breathing heavy, his fists clenched. "Get up. We're going to fix this. We're going to solve this problem permanently." What happened next would be pieced together later from forensic evidence, from patterns of blood spatter and defensive wounds, from the testimony of neighbors who heard screaming but didn't call the police until it was too late. Omar dragged Layla into the bedroom. There, in the room they'd shared for 5 weeks, in the apartment that was supposed to be her new home, he beat her with systematic brutality. When she tried to protect her stomach, he targeted her head. When she tried to protect her head, he kicked her ribs. When she screamed, he covered her mouth until she couldn't breathe. A neighbor in the apartment below finally called the police at 9:47 p.m., reporting sounds of a violent struggle and a woman screaming for help. German police arrived at 10:03 p.m., 16 minutes of response time that would have been fast enough to save Layla's life if they'd been called earlier. They found Omar in the living room, sitting on the couch with a beer, watching television. He appeared calm, cooperative. "My wife and I had an argument," he explained in fluent German. "She's very emotional, very dramatic. She's from Egypt, doesn't understand German culture. Cultural differences, you know how it is." The officers asked to see his wife. Omar led them to the bedroom. Layla Hassan was lying on the floor beside the bed. She was 24 years old. She was 5 weeks pregnant. She had been in Germany for 35 days. And she was dead. The forensic examination would later determine she'd been beaten for approximately 30 to 40 minutes. She'd suffered a fractured skull, broken ribs, internal bleeding, and extensive bruising. The cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head, combined with asphyxiation. She died fighting, her hands showing defensive wounds where she tried to protect herself. In her pocket, police found her phone. The screen was cracked from the struggle, but the device still worked. The last thing Layla had tried to do in the moments before she died was dial her mother's number in Egypt. The call hadn't connected. Omar Khalil was arrested at the scene. He showed no emotion as he was handcuffed and led away. The police found evidence throughout the apartment. The hole Omar had punched in the wall days earlier, the broken glass swept under the couch, the divorce paperwork Omar had printed earlier that day. And they found Layla's photographs of Omar's previous restraining order and police reports from his first marriage. When they contacted Amira Mostafa, Omar's first wife, she was living in a women's shelter in Cairo. She told police that Omar had abused her throughout their marriage in Germany, that she'd filed multiple reports but felt the German authorities hadn't taken her seriously because she was a foreign woman with limited German language skills. She'd finally fled back to Egypt in 2018 after Omar had choked her unconscious. She'd been too afraid to testify against him in German courts, too afraid he'd find her. "I tried to warn people about him," Amira told investigators through tears. "I told my family, I told mutual friends. But everyone said I was exaggerating, that I was just bitter about the divorce. And now another woman is dead because no one listened." The Hassan family in Cairo was notified of Layla's death by Egyptian consular officials in Berlin. Her mother collapsed upon hearing the news. Her father, the taxi driver who'd worried about sending his daughter to a man they barely knew, was inconsolable with guilt and grief. Layla's body was repatriated to Egypt 2 weeks later. The funeral was held in Cairo, attended by hundreds of family members, friends, and community members who were horrified by what had happened. Her mother could barely stand during the burial. Her father stood silently, his eyes empty, having aged decades in just days. Omar Khalil's trial began in September 2020. His defense argued that Layla's death was an accident, that they'd argued and he'd pushed her, and she'd fallen and hit her head. They painted Layla as culturally difficult, unable to adapt to German life, creating constant problems in the marriage. The prosecution presented a different narrative, a pattern of domestic violence, evidence of premeditation in the divorce paperwork Omar had prepared that same day, testimony from neighbors who'd heard previous arguments, medical evidence showing Layla had been beaten systematically over 30 to 40 minutes, and the history of violence against his first wife. The trial lasted 3 months. In December 2020, Omar Khalil was convicted of murder and sentenced to life in prison under German law, with a minimum of 15 years before eligibility for parole. But no amount of prison time could bring Layla back. No amount of justice could undo the fact that a 24-year-old woman had traveled to Germany believing she was beginning her life, only to have it brutally ended 5 weeks later. The Egyptian community in Berlin mourned. Women's rights organizations held vigils. Immigration advocates called for better protections for women on spousal visas, who were often trapped in abusive situations by their dependent immigration status. Layla's Aunt Fatima, who'd encouraged the marriage, was destroyed by guilt. She gave an interview to Egyptian media, tearfully admitting she'd known Omar had been married before but had minimized the circumstances, had believed his story about cultural incompatibility rather than investigating further. "I thought I was helping my niece build a better life," Fatima said. "Instead, I sent her to her death. I knew she was unhappy. She called me asking for help, and I told her to be patient, to be a better wife. I didn't listen. and now she's dead and I have to live with that forever. The case sparked conversations in Egypt about marriage arrangements, about sending young women to foreign countries to marry men they barely knew, about the vulnerabilities faced by immigrant women in dependent visa situations. Some families changed their practices. Others continued as they always had, trusting that their cases would be different. Layla's mother gave one interview to Egyptian television, her voice hollow with grief. "My daughter was so excited to go to Germany. She thought it was her dream coming true, a good husband, a chance at a better life, maybe bringing us there someday. Instead, I brought her home in a coffin. She'd been married 5 weeks. 5 weeks. She didn't even have time to learn German, to see the city, to make friends. She died alone in a stranger's apartment, 7,000 kilometers from home." In Berlin, in the Neukölln district, the apartment where Layla died has been rented to a new tenant. The landlord had it repainted, the walls patched, the floors cleaned. There's nothing to mark that a young woman died there, nothing to remember that Layla Hassan's dreams ended in that bedroom. In Cairo, at the cemetery where Layla is buried, her mother visits every week. She brings flowers and sits by the grave, speaking to her daughter in Arabic, apologizing for encouraging the marriage, for not sensing the danger, for failing to protect her. And in a German prison, Omar Khalil maintains his innocence. In interviews with psychologists, he shows no remorse, only anger at being caught, at having his life disrupted. He blames Layla for provoking him, for not being grateful, for not being the obedient wife he'd been promised. He'll be eligible for parole in 2035, when he's 47 years old. Young enough to rebuild his life, to marry again if he chooses, to start over. Layla will be dead forever, her potential unrealized, her life cut short at 24. This has been Secret Witness, True Crime Stories, where we uncover hidden truths and honor those whose voices were silenced. Subscribe and turn on notifications. Every day we tell stories of survival, justice, and the strength of people who refuse to be victims. If this story affected you, drop a comment with your thoughts. Share it with someone who needs to see the warning signs. Domestic violence crosses all borders, and awareness saves lives.